This one's for the ones they counted out, the ones who took hit after hit but never crumbled, the ones who walked into battles they never asked for and still came out standing. You were never just another name in the crowd. You were the anomaly, the outlier, the one who refused to break when the pressure was at its peak. They didn't expect you to rise, didn't think you'd survive the smear, the spectacle, the public takedown, but here you are, stronger than ever, standing in the very place they swore you'd never reach. They turned your struggle into a performance, cast you as the villain in a story you didn't write, made sure the world watched as they tried to erase you. But what they didn't understand is that the crowd is never loyal to the script, only to the spectacle. And now, the same eyes that once watched your downfall are witnessing their undoing. Because truth doesn't disappear, and neither do those built to withstand the storm. This isn't just survival, it's triumph. You didn't just make it through, you thrived. And that's a storyline no one can rewrite. The illusion was masterfully maintained, a spectacle that demanded the audience's participation without them even realizing it. They cheered, they jeered, they became willing players in a performance designed not to entertain, but to control. It was never truly about one individual. It was about dominance, about ensuring the system remained unquestioned. Yet, deception has a way of eroding itself over time. At first, it was nearly imperceptible. Slight changes in tone, hesitation, replacing the once effortless certainty in their voices. The energy in the air thickened as doubt crept in. Those who once ridiculed with ease found themselves pausing, reconsidering. Some vanished from the conversation entirely, as if severing their ties with the past would absolve them of their complicity. Then came the shift, subtle at first, but impossible to ignore. The weight of their amusement inverted, and the laughter that had once been their weapon of choice suddenly turned against them. The audience, once blind followers of the script they had been fed, began noticing inconsistencies, contradictions, the unraveling edges of a carefully woven lie. The stage that had been built to reduce someone to nothing was no longer a place of condemnation, but of revelation. And none of it required force, no grand revenge, no orchestrated plan. The truth had been left alone, given room to breathe, and in doing so, it revealed everything in due time. Now, the whispers followed them instead. The questions once reserved for the accused had shifted focus. Once seen as untouchable, their credibility, the very foundation they stood on, started to crack, slipping away faster than they could contain it. This was no mere twist of fate, no trivial balancing of the scales. It was a restoration of order, one that did not tip in their favor. Nothing in their rise had been accidental. Each move was precise, each word a calculated strike meant to dismantle, to ensure no alternative narrative could exist. Their success had never been about merit. It had been about elimination. They did not merely seek victory, they required a scapegoat, a necessary sacrifice to reinforce their own standing. The narrative was never spontaneous, never organic. It was sculpted meticulously, whispered into existence in spaces where objections could not reach, where their voices controlled the echo. The deception did not spread overnight. It was planted, nurtured, under the guise of casual concern, carefully framed as reasonable speculation. The lie became gospel, not because it was believed, but because questioning it required too much effort. It was simpler to accept, easier to repeat, and thus it thrived. The laughter, the disdain, the ridicule. They were never spontaneous reactions, but symptoms of control, tools used to weaken what could not be allowed to stand on its own. The manipulation worked, for a time. Words had been sharpened into weapons, crafted to strike without resistance, to ensure that when people looked, they no longer saw a person, only a distorted image, a caricature, a fabrication. Yet no illusion lasts forever. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. Luke 8:17. They thought they could bury the truth, lock it away in whispers and fabrications. But the truth is, like a seed, press it down, cover it in dirt, and all you've done is set the stage for something unstoppable. Because what they failed to realize is that truth isn't fragile. It's a force. It doesn't wither in the dark. It takes root. And when the time is right, it pushes through, breaking apart every lie, no matter how carefully constructed. They weren't just spinning a story. They were crafting an illusion, stacking deception on top of deception, convinced that if they said it enough times, it would become unshakable. It was never about reality. It was about control, about ensuring that people didn't see with their own eyes, only through the lens they had been handed. And for a while, it worked. People nodded along, accepted the version presented to them, because belief is easier than investigation. It takes effort to search for the truth, but passivity only requires agreement. And so you walked through it, carrying the weight of something you never created, burdened by accusations never proven. They didn't just question you, they demanded that you question yourself. They wanted you to shrink beneath the pressure, to let their words become your reality. But here's the thing about being chosen. You were never meant to be molded by public opinion. You were never built to be reshaped by the hands of manipulators, because when you're set apart, you don't fold, you forge. They mistook their influence for permanence, mistook their numbers for power, but neither mattered in the end, because a crowd doesn't determine truth. Truth determines itself. What they feared most wasn't your downfall, it was your endurance, because survival exposes deception in ways that words never can. The longer you stood, the more fragile their narrative became. The cracks began to show, not all at once, not with fireworks and fanfare, but in quiet moments of doubt, in the hesitations, in the subtle shifts in expression, when the weight of what they once believed began to feel unsteady. And now, look around. What was once spoken with certainty is now whispered with hesitation. The glances once filled with smugness now hold uncertainty. And the burden they tried to place on you, it's slipping from your shoulders, landing squarely back where it belongs. Because lies require constant maintenance. But the truth stands on its own. It does not beg, does not seek validation, does not tremble under scrutiny. They thought they could speak something into existence, but you were never just a character in their story. You were the proof that their version was nothing more than a fabrication. And now, as the dust settles, one thing remains unshaken: you. For a time, they stood firm in their certainty, convinced of their own righteousness, believing they were exposing something, revealing a hidden truth. Yet control was never truly theirs. They were not the architects, only the messengers, blindly following a current they mistook for free will. Meanwhile, you remained at the center of the chaos, watching as judgment was traded like a commodity, dispersed, bartered, exchanged for approval and the fleeting satisfaction of collective agreement. It was easy to believe the constructed reality, so long as no one examined its fragility. But falsehoods are brittle things. They hold together only so long as scrutiny is avoided, only as long as no one dares to dig too deep. And then, the inevitable, the slow, creeping unraveling. The truth does not need to rush. It only needs to wait. And when it arrives, it does not break the illusion. It obliterates it. You are here for a reason. If you feel the call, answer it. Click Join to unlock exclusive content, deep insights, and a powerful community. This isn't just a membership, it's an awakening. Step into your divine purpose. Join the chosen. At first, they spoke without hesitation. Their conviction was a shield, a defense against the possibility that they had been deceived. They repeated the tale as though it was irrefutable, carrying the weight of their certainty with pride, spreading it as if possession of the story made them superior. To doubt would mean acknowledging their own misjudgment. But time does not preserve illusions, it erodes them. The fractures started small, barely noticeable. A contradiction here, a discrepancy there, a moment of discomfort when something didn't align as neatly as it once had. And doubt, once planted, never retreats. It lingers, grows, dismantles certainty from within, turning quiet suspicion into undeniable realization. The murmurs began soft at first. Why does the story keep shifting? Was there ever proof? How did we accept this without question? One by one, those who had once spoken with such confidence hesitated. The narrative, once seamless, now bore holes they could no longer ignore. Conversations once taken as fact began to feel incomplete, unsteady. And yet, there was no battle, no counterattack, no desperate attempt to reclaim the truth. It was left to unfold naturally, left to breathe. In the end, it was not opposition that dismantled the deception, but silence, the absence of validation, the weight of uncertainty, the realization that they had been misled not by you, but by their own willingness to believe. For there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, nor hidden that will not be known. Luke 12:2. They stood tall, convinced that their version of the story would hold. They spoke as if their words were carved into stone, as if no one would ever dare to challenge them. And for a time, it seemed like they were right. The story spread, the audience believed, and no one questioned the script they were handed. They mistook their influence for permanence, mistook their authority for truth. But a lie, no matter how well crafted, can never outlive the truth. Because truth is not fragile. It does not need defending, does not beg to be heard, does not struggle to survive. Truth waits. And when the moment comes, when the weight of reality is too heavy to ignore, no illusion can stand against it. They thought they were in control. They thought they were the ones setting the stage, directing the narrative, holding the power. But power built on deception is borrowed. It never truly belongs to the one holding it. They were merely leasing their authority, borrowing time from a system that would eventually turn against them. And now, their time has run out. They did not just misjudge the situation. They miscalculated the very nature of truth itself. They built their words on perception, shaped reality through influence, convinced the world that what they said mattered more than what was real. And for a while, people accepted it, because it is easier to follow than to question, easier to accept than to investigate. But deception is a weak foundation. It cannot withstand scrutiny. It cannot survive when people begin to look too closely. And now, the shift has begun. The same voices that once repeated their words without hesitation now speak with uncertainty. The same people who stood behind them now step back, watching, waiting, realizing that something isn't adding up. Their confidence has turned into hesitation, their certainty into doubt. Because when you build your house on shifting sand, the storm will always come. If your heart overflows with God's blessings, let that love shine. Click the super thank you button and give $20 or more to plant seeds of faith that will impact countless lives. Your generosity reflects His abundance. Be a vessel of His grace and watch His kingdom flourish through you. And here it is, the reckoning, the unveiling. The moment where everything they thought was permanent begins to slip through their grasp. The weight of their own deception now rests on their shoulders, and they can feel it. Every conversation feels different now. Every whisper holds a question. They know it, and so does everyone else. The truth didn't need a grand entrance. It didn't need a fight, a struggle, or an army to defend it. It simply arrived. And with its arrival, their illusion collapsed. Because that's what always happens. Truth doesn't need permission to exist. It simply stands, unmoved, unshaken, unstoppable. They believe themselves to be the arbiters of the story, bending it to their will, using it as both shield and sword. Names were turned into spectacle, reputations reduced to entertainment, and the illusion spread, not through evidence, not through reason, but through sheer momentum. It was never about truth. It was about control, and they reveled in it, ensuring that every conversation revolved around their chosen narrative, each sneer and smirk reinforcing their version of events. The crowd didn't hesitate to follow, not because they understood, but because they were eager to belong, to be part of something, to align with those who appeared untouchable. But illusions are fragile things. The pedestal they built, the same platform used to cast others down, now begins to fracture beneath their feet. The eyes that once watched in amusement are now filled with doubt. The hands that once applauded have begun to still. The question is no longer about their target, it's about them. The certainty they once commanded is faltering, replaced by murmurs, by half-formed doubts, creeping into conversations that had once been airtight. The story, once accepted without question, is now met with scrutiny, with skepticism. And none of it required resistance. No desperate struggle for justice, no attempt to rewrite the past, only patience. They remained in place, fixed in their own version of events, while everything around them changed. And now, they are the ones being measured, their words dissected, their every move analyzed. The same whispers they once used to tighten their grip are now slipping from their grasp, turning against them, revealing the cracks they never thought would show. Because illusions are borrowed time, and the clock has run out. The stage they once commanded now feels unfamiliar beneath their feet. The very voices that once championed their narrative now linger in uncertainty, watching with apprehension as the weight of their own choices bears down on them. What they once wielded so carelessly, words, influence, manipulation, has turned against them. They assumed they were the architects of someone else's downfall, yet every move they made only laid the foundation for their own reckoning. There was never a need to retaliate, never a reason to stoop to their level, because balance does not require force. It operates silently, in ways unseen, indifferent to pride or malice. This was not about settling scores or delivering vengeance. It was a simple, inevitable course correction. They mistook control for permanence, assuming they could shape perception without consequence. But in their relentless pursuit to dismantle someone else, they left themselves exposed. And now, the weight of their deception is undeniable. They did not just undermine another, they undermined truth itself. And truth, no matter how long it is buried, always resurfaces, unyielding and absolute. The shift is undeniable. The momentum they once relied on has reversed, sweeping them into the very storm they once unleashed. The crowd that had eagerly echoed their words now watches with uncertainty, their once unwavering loyalty wavering under the weight of inconsistencies. The carefully woven illusion they spun is unraveling strand by strand, no longer a seamless reality, but a tangled mess of contradictions. This is not coincidence, nor is it mere chance. It is the restoration of equilibrium, the natural order reclaiming its place. Because when someone seeks to erase another's identity, they do not diminish the target. They reveal the cracks in their own foundation. And that foundation is now crumbling, not by force, but by inevitability. Their downfall requires no declaration. There is no need for confrontation, no grand unveiling. The truth has already spoken for itself. In the silence of those who once cheered for them, in the sideways glances that now carry uncertainty instead of admiration. There is no easy way back from this. Losing credibility is not a temporary setback. It is a final verdict. The image they carefully constructed is no longer theirs to control. No matter how desperately they try to reclaim it, to patch the fractures, to rewrite the past, they cannot undo what has been seen. And the people who once stood by them, who once followed without question, are now stepping away, distancing themselves, some even turning outright against them. The weight they tried to shift onto another has found its rightful place, squarely on their shoulders. The whispers they once controlled now slip through their grasp, turning against them, echoing their own missteps. The story they thought they were writing was never yours to carry. And in the end, they did not break you. They only revealed themselves. There comes a point where pretense can no longer serve as a shield. The weight of exposure is inescapable, leaving no space for retreat, no chance for revision, no way to erase what has already been seen. They expected resistance, anticipated a desperate plea, assumed that defending yourself would consume you. But you didn't play their game. You let them construct their illusions, shape their version of events, build their house of cards, while you remained unmoved. Because what they failed to understand was simple. Truth does not beg for recognition. And now look where you stand, unshaken, unbothered, unbroken, while they stumble beneath the weight of their own deception. There was never a need for retaliation. Choosing self-preservation over conflict is a form of strength they will never grasp. They thrived on spectacle, fed on division, mistook chaos for control. But your path was different. You never sought validation, never fought to be believed. You moved forward, letting time unravel the falsehoods, allowing reality to speak for itself. And those who see beyond surface-level distractions, they recognize the difference. They distinguish between those who fabricate stories and those who simply live them. They understand that while others were invested in tearing down, you were occupied with building something real. And the ones still clinging to a narrative they refused to question, they were never meant to see the truth to begin with. Some hold on to deception not because it convinces them, but because accepting they were wrong is too great a burden. That burden, however, is not yours to carry. Power is not in the noise. It is in the silence, in knowing that no matter the attempts to control perception, the final outcome was never in their grasp. And now, their attempts to maintain their grip are unraveling. The confidence they once wielded so effortlessly is now hollow. The certainty in their voices replaced with hesitation. They assumed deception was a stable foundation, but once the structure collapsed, they were left scrambling. The performance shifts. Suddenly, they are remorseful. Their words carefully softened, their tone transformed into something rehearsed. But true accountability never requires a script. The apologies arrive, calculated and vague. designed to offer just enough without ever fully conceding fault. They do not regret their choices, they regret the consequences. Then comes the rebranding, a desperate effort to rewrite themselves as misunderstood, to paint their actions as mere mistakes rather than deliberate harm. They were misled, they were unaware, they simply repeated what they believed. But the transparency of it is glaring. It is not growth, it is damage control. And while some will be swayed, eager to accept the illusion once again, the reality remains. Trust does not return once broken. Redemption is not a performance. It is a process, one that requires more than empty rhetoric. And the one thing they cannot bring themselves to offer is the only thing that could ever make a difference: true accountability. The aftermath is undeniable. Desperation lingers in their actions, a frantic attempt to mend what cannot be restored. They adjust their tone, soften their words, try to reframe the past as a misunderstanding rather than a deliberate betrayal. But the damage is done. They assume they can rewrite perception, that if they change the narrative now, people will follow without hesitation, just as they did before. What they fail to grasp is that the moment of blind trust has passed, the illusion shattered, and no amount of performance can put it back together. The same people who once defended them now hesitate, their loyalty tainted with doubt. The certainty is gone. Every sentence they speak is weighed differently now, dissected, examined, no longer taken at face value. Because betrayal is not easily erased, and deception lingers longer in memory than any act of goodwill ever could. Look closely. The shift is unmistakable. Conversations are no longer filled with admiration, but with quiet skepticism. Where there was once unwavering support, now there are measured responses, careful glances, an unspoken wariness that was never there before. It is not anger, not outrage, but something more damning: mistrust. People do not forget the moment they realized they had been misled. And even those who remain, those who still engage, do so with caution, always aware that what was once believed without question has proven fragile. Their words no longer carry the weight they once did. Instead of certainty, they are met with silence, with hesitation, with a pause that did not exist before. They will attempt to repair, to reclaim lost ground, to regain the influence they once wielded so effortlessly. But the stain of exposure is not so easily washed away. Trust is not a currency that can be repurchased. Once broken, it is no longer theirs to control. Their influence has faded, reduced to echoes in a space where they once commanded attention. They fought to rewrite history, to ensure their version of events remained intact. But reality has shifted. The people who once followed without hesitation now hesitate before believing. Their unwavering support eroded by the weight of truth. Every step they take is scrutinized, every statement met with measured silence rather than blind acceptance. They assumed they could transfer the burden of doubt onto someone else, force another to carry the weight of their deception. But now, that burden clings to them instead. The stain they once tried to place on another has become their own, a mark they can't outrun. Their reputation, once a tool of influence, has become a fragile thing, something easily questioned, something forever altered. They exist in a space between past glory and present uncertainty, tolerated but never fully trusted. Their voice may still be heard, but it no longer dictates the room. The shift is unmistakable. Their presence, once commanding, now feels uncertain. Their words lacking the same weight they once carried. They act as if nothing has changed, but the energy around them tells another story. The silence that greets their declarations is louder than any accusation. The ones who once praised them now watch from a distance, no longer certain, no longer convinced. They will attempt to reconstruct what was lost, to piece together an identity untarnished by their own actions. But the foundation has cracked. People do not forget the moment they realized they were deceived, and no matter how much effort is put into rebuilding, the fractures remain visible. They may find new followers, may manage to convince some that the past no longer matters, but those who saw the truth will always remember. They assumed control was permanent. That perception could be shaped indefinitely. But deception is a fleeting currency, and they have exhausted their supply.